3, 2, 1, and we are now live on YouTube with Amy Townsend.
Hi.
Some of you, thanks for coming on, Amy. Some of you have been asking fanatically for us to cover more about the Chris Watts case. We did do a video on it a year or two ago about how he would be surviving in prison, and because of the heinous nature of his crimes and the recent documentary American Murder, so many people just reached out and asked us, to bring this up to date. So Amy is it you and a group of people behind the channel? Is it just your channel specifically, Amy, on YouTube?
It's me and my husband. We both work on it and host it and do all the research. So
you want to tell the people what your channel is about then?
Yeah, so we're called True Crime Recaps, and we are devoted to delivering you all the crime in half the time. And that is mainly because I have a 0 level attention span, and I really just want to hear the highlights myself. So that's kind of what we offer. So every story is under 30 minutes. We try to keep it to 20 minutes, if not shorter. And it's really just the highlights with all of the sources in the descriptions below, so you can go down the rabbit hole on those parts that you find the most interesting.
So I'm just going to share our live stream link right now on all my platforms. You want to tell people what got you interested in the Chris Watts case?
Yeah, interestingly, back in 2019, I heard a podcast, I can't remember which one, that they were discussing the case. And I was just like, I had sort of followed, I don't want to say followed the case when it was happening in 2018, but I was aware of it, like probably most of you. But the podcast really got into more depth on what a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about here today. And I was like, what am I hearing? So I just really dived into this rabbit hole of research and discovery and reading about the characters involved and the many, many bizarre, kind of strange things that weren't necessarily investigated very thoroughly, that we're also going to be talking about today. So that really just got me started. And I actually started my own podcast to talk about this case because people were sick of hearing me talk about it.
So in the description box below this video are all the links that Amy has sent over, including the YouTube channel. Congrats on having over 100,000 subs, even though you've not got your plaque yet. I'm sure many of my subscribers, there's going to be so much interest in what you're doing over there. They want to go down there and click over and follow your stuff and check out what's going on. So where would you like to start then with Chris Watts this evening?
Let's get into it. Let's talk about how he actually met this other woman, who is Nicole Kessinger, the mistress. So Chris and Nicole, they met at work. She was a contract health and safety person with Anadarko Petroleum in Platteville, Colorado. She worked in the office. Chris was an operator in the field. Now, their paths crossed in the office sometimes, their eyes met in the lunchroom, that kind of thing. And it was love at first sight for both of them. So when we first started talking about Nicole, she has a very interesting characteristic that we got thousands of comments on. And I want to show that to you right now. So take a look at this.
Hi. It's me. I miss your face. I was just calling to say hi.
So the giggle. In the discovery documents, they literally refer to it as an eerily disconcerting childlike giggle. And they refer to it that way a couple of times, which I thought was pretty interesting considering this legal document. This person is totally creeped out by her giggle. So you can kind of just get a sense of this is who she was to Chris. All right, so after the murder and before she talked to the police, she deleted all of her search history. She deleted any texts, photos, every trail there might have been between her and Chris in this case. But they were able to do a data dump and recover a lot of that information. One of the things that they recovered was search history about Amber Frye. And I think that this is very interesting because it just kind of speaks to her mindset at that time. So the searches were, who is Amber Frye? How much is Amber Frye worth? And did Amber Frye get a book deal? So, girl, you are no Amber Frye. Like, God bless you, but come on. Amber Frye, just as a reminder for everybody, she was Scott Peterson's mistress. The connection here is that Scott Peterson murdered his pregnant wife, Lacey Peterson, in California in 2002. That is before social media. That is before we could all know everything about everybody. So in this case, she compares herself to Amber and says that Nikki herself is a victim, that she was lied to just as much as Shanann. But the problem here is that Shanann did not know about Nicole. Nicole knew about Shanann. And as we go through this, you'll learn that there are hours of search terms and search history that they were able to recover where she was searching the name Shanann Watts, Chris Watts. So she certainly knew a lot more than what she said. So that's the first glaring inconsistency. No victim. So as we move forward, in that summer, the summer of 2018, she searched Shanann's name, and obviously the very first thing to come up is going to be Shanann's Facebook page, because that is where Shanann lived. She posted everything about her life, about Chris's life. Every single thing is on that Facebook page. If you see it, there's our dog. If you see it once, you see everything about her. And that is what the Netflix documentary centers around. So let's get into that. So the documentary, American Murder, it's told from Shanann's point of view. Uses her Facebook posts, text messages between her and her friends and Chris. It uses news articles, police footage to really tell the story from the victim's point of view, which made it incredibly powerful because we don't get to see that. Really,
it's heartbreaking, isn't it? You know something what's going to happen, and all the pictures of the kids and the mom, and just also happy.
No, yeah. It's mind-blowing because you really do feel like you're going through this from the very beginning to the place where this person has decided to murder his whole family. And it's mind-blowing. But in that documentary, and for good reason, this is on purpose, they wanted to keep it for the victims, between just the victim story, which is super powerful, and I loved it. But I was also, really curious about this other woman, this sort of catalyst to this entire tragedy, and what's the story there. So we're all going to get into her in a little bit, but I'll just walk you through the documentary and with some little added tidbits that maybe they didn't come out in the actual documentary. So Shanann, she's working as a direct sales rep for this health and weight loss company called Thrive is the product. Lavelle is the company. It's a multi-level marketing thing. And it's hard to make money in those things. But Shanann is she's a hustler and she's doing it. And part of the way that she's doing it is because she's posting constantly. And to do that, she really has to form this picture of a perfect life. And Chris and her kids, part of that perfect life. So that became in itself an issue. And they do talk about this in the documentary briefly, that Chris really was an introvert and he didn't want to be on camera. But Shanann, the extrovert, the salesperson, kept sort of dragging him into the picture, making him talk and doing these things. And I mean, she's just trying to provide for her family. But, it became a bigger issue for Chris in their relationship. On August 13th, 2018, that's when we learned just how much his anger had built up about that. So she had been on a business trip with, some of her other friends and coworkers in Arizona since August 10th. She was supposed to come back on August 12th at around 11 p.m. And that we'll connect that in a little bit. But her flight was delayed. So she didn't get in until around 1:45 that evening. And Nicole Atkinson, her friend who plays a big part in this story, dropped her off at the house. Now this is the last video of Shanann alive. So that's so powerful because you know that she's walking into Chris waiting for her. And I believe that this was completely premeditated, and we'll go through some of the reasons that back that up. But when she was murdered, she was pregnant with Nico. So this becomes a huge issue. So let me just talk about that a little bit in a little bit more detail. So on June 11th, she posted a pregnancy announcement to Facebook, and that's also featured in the documentary. Now it's no longer available on her actual Facebook page, but CNN posted this clip. So let's just watch that.
We did it. I like that shirt. Really?
Really?
That's awesome. So pink means...
That's just a test.
I know. They just said the pink is going to be girls.
I know. Just a test.
That's awesome. Guess when you want to, it happens.
I mean,
Ooh,
you
gives
just
you
want to punch
chills?
him.
Yeah, it gives you chills.
It's horrifying, because what we know is that at that moment, he was really starting to develop this very serious relationship with Nikki. They had these emails going back and forth at this time. And he said later, he was more scared than thrilled. He knew he was developing these feelings. He didn't want her to find out about the pregnancy. But what he didn't realize is that Nikki most certainly knew. And if she didn't know right then, she was about to know not long after. So she tried to delete her search history. We've said that, but some of the things that they've managed to recover were specifically on August 4th, she searched for Chris and Shanann's Facebook accounts. That's a specific search term. But before that, she had been searching Shanann's name. Obviously, Facebook would pop up. So one glance at her Facebook page, she'd been posting about it consistently ever since that announcement. She would have known. It's almost impossible to believe that she couldn't have known. But at some point that summer, Nikki told Chris that she wanted to give him his first son. That is something that he told the CBI later when they talked to him in February of 2019. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So real quick, before we move off this, I swear to God, we're moving off this, but I want to tell you one more thing of this very interesting connection that another YouTuber, a YouTube channel called Plunder, made about that announcement and Chris and Nikki's relationship. So the date that Shanann posted again was June 11th, 2018. On June 12th, check out this work email between Nikki and Chris. So what is this honest conversation she's thanking him for? And this is after just a random general group email. So this is the very first personal email that they exchanged, and it's right after she posted a pregnancy announcement. It's it's coincidental in a case full of coincidences. So not to jump even further out of this documentary flow, but I did just want you to hear this clip from Nikki in a police interview when they ask her, "Did you know?" And she insists that she did not know Shanann was pregnant.
And you said earlier you did not know she was pregnant until reading the newspaper.
Yeah.
So that never came up in any conversation. There was no indications that was going on. He never hinted to anything like that. As far as you knew, he was just leaving her. He had 2 children, and that was the final take on that.
Yes, I know why he lied to me. He lied to me because if I'd have known that he had a child on the way, I'd have never wasted my time with him in the first place. Like, none of this would ever even occur if he had just told me the truth.
So do you think if he found out that you, if, let's say this week you guys were to go look at some apartments, and this is hypothetical, but you've never found out that his wife was pregnant, would that have changed anything? Like you just said, if I knew his wife was pregnant, I wouldn't be in this picture. So if his wife was not pregnant, and forgive me, but if he takes her out of the picture, you're never going to know that she was pregnant, right?
What do you mean takes her out of the picture? Like,
if he murdered her, she's out of the picture. You're never going to know if she was pregnant. If he can get away with murder, you're not going to. I got divorced from my wife. You say, do you understand what I'm saying here? If she's gone,
but this,
Don't lead,
hypothetically,
please. Don't lead on.
hypothetically, if she,
Okay.
you understand where I'm going? If
Right,
you
but
didn't know,
You're leading into questions that are nothing with your,
if you didn't know
wait, Nick,
that she was dead,
did you hear what I said?
I'm following you. I just want her to answer a question that relates to, she said something that's important, that if he didn't have a child on the way, or if she didn't know that, she would have continued the relationship, right?
but he killed his kids. At what point does he think that I'm going to be on a
I'm
relationship?
not talking about the children. I'm just talking specifically about her. If you only knew, if the kids were still here, and he called you and said, "I'm divorced from my wife," and he gets away with this, do you understand what I'm thinking from his aspect?
I still wouldn't do it. I still wouldn't do it because I'd be like, where did she go?
Okay.
Because I'm under the impression that she's a really good mom. Like, he never bashed her momming skills. Like, no, I would, no,
Okay.
no.
And that's that. You see where I'm trying to take that?
Yes.
So you guys never had a conversation about the child, period.
I didn't know at all.
You described her as a catalyst. Would you go a little bit above a catalyst and say she kind of possibly incentivized through words that were given to him that weren't documented, in person? Maybe she said things to him in person.
Absolutely, she said things to him in person, and they are documented. That he has repeated those to FBI down the road after he was sentenced. But I mean, it's just human nature. It's hard to. There is no, and like we're only digging this is just the tip, because there are more and more that these. I'm trying to think of the right word. That she is trying to say, I am just a victim. I had no idea. I was completely lied to. But in the background, we have to remember that social media exists, and that we know from her Google searches that she was searching those names. Now, if she was living like the Unabomber in a cabin and had no access to the internet, maybe that we could believe that. But it's just very hard to believe that you didn't know any of these things. So also, interestingly, that man that you heard in that clip, that is not her lawyer. That is her father. So they really didn't push very hard at all. Now, to get back to the video, or to get back to the documentary, excuse me. So
I've got one more question. What was the most incriminating thing that Chris said about Nikki?
Well, a couple of things. I think he said that she wanted to give him his first son. She told the police that really that they weren't together at all. She was really trying to give him his space and get back with his wife and all of these things. And Chris said, that was categorically untrue, that they were spending every night together while Shanann and them were gone. They were saying, "I love you," that Nikki was upset when, I don't want to jump ahead because there's a clip that you're going to hear, and then you'll hear the answer to that. And that's one of the more incriminating things he said. So let me get to that with some additional audio, and then you can really hear for yourself.
Thanks.
So now Shanann and the girls go to North Carolina for 5 weeks. And they, the plan was for Chris to come out and join them the last week that they were all home and come home together. That we're going to see grandparents, they're going out there for friends. But during that time, Shanann and Chris's parents had this huge fallout. They call it Nutgate in the documentary because Cece, their youngest, is allergic to tree nuts. She has this deathly allergy. And when she's over at Chris's parents' house, she comes into contact or is exposed to pistachio ice cream, I think it was. There's a few different versions. So Shanann goes wild. She's trying to protect her child. She gets into this huge argument with Chris's mom, who by all reports has somewhat of a similar personality to Shanann. So it's very much like this, and Chris is in the middle. She asks Chris to please stick up for his family, to his parents, and he doesn't want to do that. And in hindsight, looking back, it is shown that that was really the straw that broke the murderer's back. Like at that point, he'd already had this 5-week sort of blissful interlude with Nikki, who she's, being the cool girl, and she's trying not to, she's telling him to do his thing. And then he goes home to Shanann and has this experience, and he feels like his family's getting ripped away from him, and his father is his best friend, and it's a huge issue. So it's so huge that by the time they get back to Colorado, in Chris's mind, this marriage is done. He's told her he does not want this third baby, that he has not told her that he wants to separate. He's refusing intimacy, he's refusing counseling, but he has not told her he wants to separate the way that Nikki says he told her kind of thing. But again, it all goes back to check out Facebook, because this is not breakup talk on Facebook, on Shanann's Facebook. So after the murders on August 13th, this is when everything starts to go wrong for Chris in the documentary. And it all starts with Nicole Atkinson, Shanann's friend. If Chris had a plan at all, this woman foiled it. God bless her. So on Monday, August 13th, Shanann had a doctor appointment at 9 a.m. Nicole had been together with her all weekend. She knew Shanann was having problems with Chris. She knew she was feeling sick. She was worried about her, and she tried to check on her. She couldn't get a hold of her. She went to the doctor's office to check and see if she had been there. The doctor said no. So she goes back to Shanann's house, and that is when everything starts to blow up. She can see Shanann's favorite shoes are inside the door. She can see the car with the car seats inside the garage. Something is wrong. Meanwhile, Chris, at this point, this is around noon on that Monday, Chris is out at the oil site where he's hid Shanann and the girls' bodies. Now, this is the image that he marked up for the police to show where they were hidden. You can kind of see in this image the first letter of each of their names where they're hidden. So the S on the ground and the B and C on the oil tanks. So this site is 45 minutes away, but on Friday, August 10th, he volunteered to go out there to fix a problem. So to me, this is another thing that proves this is planned. He was planning this practically from the time he got back from this North Carolina trip. So by the time his coworkers get to the site, Chris is acting normal. They all say, this is all based of information in the discovery files. They're saying he's like any other day. He's dressed a little sloppier than normal. His car is parked a little farther away than normal. It's next to like where he buried Shanann. But beyond that, everything's fine. But he starts to get these phone calls. He's getting a call from Nicole where Shanann's mother is calling him. Her other friends are wondering, where is she? So things are already starting to fall apart. But it's when Nicole says that she called the police to come out and do a welfare check at the house that Chris comes home after trying to stall her, say, Shanann was at a play date or some such thing. So when he gets back on the documentary, you can see him pull up and it kind of cuts to him opening the door for everybody to come in and search. But watch this. So he stops his truck. Remember, only hours ago, he murdered his family. Comes running out, and he, obviously they're all standing there completely petrified that Shanann and the girls are hurt inside the house. But what does Chris do? He goes into the garage and stops at the car. What the? It's completely bizarre. What are you doing? So there are a lot of theories about this. The most prevalent theory is that he's getting a wedding ring, Shanann's wedding ring, out of the passenger seat of her car. And he takes it back inside with him. Later in the documentary, we see him give it to the policeman to say, as proof, this is why, Shanann left me and took the girls. Even though her purse, her car keys, her wallet, the medicines, everything is still there. So it's clearly, dude, what is your plan here? But as if all that wasn't enough, his neighbor has surveillance video that shows something very unusual. So in the upper left corner, you can see Chris's truck backing into the garage. Now he's loading the truck. And he drives away. So the neighbor points out that never in all of his history of being in that house has he ever seen Chris back his truck up to the garage and load anything. And Chris is clearly acting very suspicious as well. They showed that in the documentary, and the neighbor points out to the police that he's not acting right at all. So this is just going completely downhill for Chris. Now, as the police were searching the house, something interesting. Thousands of viewers watched this documentary and thought they spotted the ghost of a little girl in the kids' room. So watch the back bedroom until the end. Now, while this is happening, Chris is looking at Shanann's phone. He's freaking out. He just murdered somebody, 4 somebodies, not hours ago. There's Nicole Atkinson. And he's putting up this show of trying to find where Shanann could possibly be. And what is that? A little girl.
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
It's crazy, but it's kind of not crazy because that ghost is actually Nicole's daughter. So she is in the driveway. You can see her there. She came over with her mom and brother to help search. But of course, what the fly? What was that? So a little bit crazy there. So then the next thing to prove his guilt beyond a shadow of a doubt also has to do with Nicole. Bless her heart. So she actually set up this press conference, the press conference that Chris was completely guilty. She told him that the news was going to be at his house for a press conference the next morning at 7:30. He had no choice in the matter. So he kind of hustled his ass out onto the porch and gave them the most guilt-inducing press conference anybody's ever seen in their lives. Based on that, he got called in for a polygraph based on that and everything else on August 15th at 11 a.m. So in the documentary, Tammy, the CBI agent we see here, she makes it a point to say it would be very dumb of him to take a polygraph if he had something to do with his family's disappearance. But he does it anyway. Of course, he fails. And as he's arrested, this is them doing a body check to check for defensive wounds on him, of which he has none. We're going to get into that. But since he is such a passive-aggressive liar, it's hard to know exactly what happened in the early morning hours of August 13th. So he's told a few versions of that. The first version that day, he said he killed Shanann after watching her murder the girls over the baby monitor because he had just told her he wanted a divorce. The second confession was in November when he pleaded guilty to all 4 of their murders in exchange for taking the death penalty off the table and life in prison. Now, the documentary does point out that the only reason he got the death penalty off the table was because of Shanann's parents. They didn't want to play God and take his life, even though he had no problem taking their daughter and grandchildren. But it's in the third confession in February of 2019 when the CBI, Colorado Bureau of Investigation, go to visit him in Wisconsin in prison and tie up loose ends, because he had not really given any details about these murders. So I will tell you right now, there are some shocking details, and I want to be sure that there's a warning out here that what you will hear, it's disturbing. So basically, Chris wasn't expecting them, which is why he gave so many more details, he has said later. But number one, he said he actually got the idea to blame Shanann from Tammy, the CBI agent, originally. In the documentary, she suggests that maybe Shanann hurt the girls. Did you have to, was there an accident, just to get him talking, and it worked. But he says he got that idea from them and he just ran with it. But he says that the actual truth was Shanann got into bed. She got home, she got into bed. They had sex. He got on top of her. He strangled her, he straddled her. And they were having a conversation about getting a divorce. And she was crying. He makes a point to say that he remembers mascara running down her face, which actually ties into the sheet they found in the garbage after this, which was covered with makeup. So he says to the FBI that in this third confession that she told him she was going to take the girls and he was never going to see them again. And for that, he says he strangled her and killed her. As he was wrapping her in the fitted sheet, Bella, his oldest, came into the room and asked, "What's wrong with mommy?" And he said, "Mommy's sick." He takes her outside. He lays her body in the floor of the cab of his truck. He grabs the girls, still alive, puts them in the back seat. They drive 45 minutes, he has to think about this, out to the oil site, where he buries Shanann and Nico in this shallow grave. He smothers the girls in the backseat of his truck and then puts them in the separate oil batteries. Horrifying. So as horrified, before I get off of that, they also asked him point blank if Nikki had anything to do with this murder. Did she contribute to it in any way? And he said, no, this whole relationship contributed to it. So he doesn't really expand on that as much. He does in this interview say that she wanted this to give him his first son. He says that she wanted to have a deeper relationship with him, that they were spending every night together. In this interview, that's where all of these other things kind of come out. But wait, there's more. So while he's in prison, he's developing this relationship with a pen pal named Sherilyn Cadle. She's taking these letters that he's writing to her, and with his permission, develops a book called Letters from Christopher. In this book, he expands on the details that he gave the FBI. Chris is the devil, and here's why. Just like the devil, there's a lot of truth and there's a lot of lies. So it's hard to understand what's true and what's a lie. So to the FBI, he says what could be considered, it was not a premeditated murder. This was a rage-induced murder, and then I ended up killing all of them. To her, he says that he actually tried to kill his daughters before he killed Shanann. But he didn't kill them. He thought he had, but they were still alive. So while he was wrapping Shanann in this fitted sheet, goes back to his story to the FBI. Bella came in and he was surprised because he thought he had killed her. He thought he had smothered her in her bedroom along with Celeste. So then we go back to the narrative of this from the CBI, where he loads them all into the truck. They go out to the oil site, and what happens happens. So it's absolutely insane. The level of details just continues to come out, that everything wasn't said all at once, which is what makes us all wonder, like, what's next? What's still unsaid? What's still out there? So the big kind of, so what's still out there, what doesn't make sense right now is, Nicole, what was that relationship really going on there? And in that book, Letters from Christopher, he alludes to some dark things that went on at Nikki's apartment, that went on between him and Nikki, things that he says he'll never talk about, he'll take to his grave. So if that's what he's talking about, like, what is he not talking about? So it's unfathomable. But again, through the discovery, you can kind of see some unusual searches, and one of them is Nikki's, one of the deleted searches they were able to recover, where she is searching in anticipation for her August 11th date with Chris, she is searching on anal sex. So she's looking through that. She's also searching porn. And then they make a point to say this is by no means the only time she was searching for porn. So, I mean, no judgment on the porn. But honestly, things are much more intense than she's leading people to believe. On November 19th, Chris was sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. So now he's in prison.
Okay, I've got a question. People watching porn all over the world, people having affairs all over the world, people having love triangles all over the world.
Yeah.
What is different about this case that makes someone execute their entire family, little girls, pregnant wife? What is different? What is the factor here?
I mean, you have to just say it was the perfect storm of tragedy. So he's got this relationship with a wife that he feels submissive to, that he feels like he can't be himself with. He said that multiple times. Then all of a sudden along comes this girl who is making him feel like he can be himself. This is one of the things that he says again multiple times, that this is the only person he felt comfortable with, like he could actually be himself with. And then all of a sudden they have another baby coming along to add to some already stressful financial problems. And then that's also stressing his relationship with this other person. It's stressing his relationship with his wife. This nutgate happened with his family. Now his family is cut off. Is literally the perfect storm of just, that was it. And Chris, you know, they always say that as a person, when you're keeping all of that inside, it's going to come out in a horrifying way. And I don't know that we've ever heard of anything more horrifying than this case, which is what makes it so, you know, just an endless cycle of what and how.
So Chris obviously scored high on the psychopath test. Did his mistress score high on the psychopath test?
You have to wonder, because when you hear the audio in her police interviews, like the little clip that you just heard already, I had to literally go back and listen to a few times and be like, does she know that they're dead? I was like, well, maybe she doesn't know that they're dead. No, she knows. She knows they're dead. And she still sounds, it's very much like, this is all about what's happening to me. How is this going to affect my life? This is horrible for me. I can't believe it. I'm such a victim. I'm like, girl, you know, all these people died. What are you talking about? So it's, I mean, obviously I'm not a psychologist. Would not call her a psychopath, especially not to her face. But it's like, I mean, you just have to wonder, what are you thinking?
Did Chris have any encounters, violent encounters, or history of abuse or drugs or anything out of the ordinary, you know, from childhood into adulthood?
No, not a history of abuse. Certainly not with Shanann at all. And Nicole makes a point to say that he was always very even-keeled with her, never showed a temper at all. There has been questions come up about, was he taking steroids because he's so fit and he really had lost a lot of weight recently, and that he attributes to these Thrive patches. And you know, God knows I've never taken those. I don't know what's in them, but it has come up. Well, he was double dosing on them. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't sure, you know, what the problem was as far as how he was feeling in those days. He did say that he felt amped up a lot and wasn't sleeping. So where that came from, we don't know, but no, there wasn't necessarily a history of drug abuse that's been documented anyway.
Did he have a criminal record of any nature, and were there any stories of him being violent that didn't end up with law enforcement anymore?
I'm trying to think back if I've ever read anything like that. I have not read anything like that, no. And I think his parents, also everybody in his life from, you know, when he was a kid, were shocked, like all of us, that such a person that looked so normal, I mean, could react like this. It's insane.
With the steroid thing then, did they do any kind of analysis on his blood?
Okay, it's a great question. No, they didn't. And they didn't do any kind of a psychiatric workup on him either, because he confessed right away. And that is a huge part of what he's trying to mount, or was, at least in August, sort of a defense to appeal or somehow get a lesser prison sentence, because they didn't do any of those things, because it was very rushed. He confessed right away. By November, he was sentenced. He was in prison and already in another prison by December, and he'd only murdered them in August. You know, we can look back, you can look around right now and see people that have been sitting in prison for a year. We still haven't seen a trial come up out from them. So yeah, it was definitely questions. There's question upon question in this case.
So I've met quite a few killers, and even they had a code of not harming women or kids. To cross that line, then, do you think that he thought he was so smart he could absolutely get away with it? Or do you think that he was so infatuated that he just had an obstacle in the way and the obstacle had to be eliminated at all costs?
Maybe both. I mean, he certainly didn't act smart, that's for sure. He acted very dumb, but it's been said that his IQ is 140, and that's high. But maybe high on that side where you don't have a lot of common sense, but you know, you have a lot of like more book smarts. It's hard to fathom how he thought he was going to get away with it, how he thought he could be with this person, but that he really wasn't thinking. I mean, he has said, again, to this Letters from Christopher author, that he felt demon possessed. He felt like something had taken him over in these weeks. He blames Nikki for that. He blames her. That feels a little bit like, all right, dude, you don't need to blame everything on this girl. That's you. But I mean, it's just, there's so many questions. It's hard to understand how something like this could happen.
Were there rumors that they were into occult practices?
There were rumors, yes, but Nikki was interested in crystals. I mean, crystals is not, I'm interested in crystals. I'm not going to go out and murder somebody or convince them to murder somebody. So it's hard to understand, like, at what level is someone's perspective, like, well, it was that, but that's nothing, or was there more? And we just don't know about that.
Yeah, so he's reaching for mitigating circumstances, basically.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I want to play you a little clip from a phone call that he has with his this unidentified man about getting out of prison. Since we're talking about it, it's mind-blowing.
Every question that he asked me, I was just agreeing with them and just going along with what he said. Because, well, I guess you got to tell something. And, you know, they came here to prison and interrogated me. They were in the street program, like they, you know, they're just helping me when they were actually interrogating me again. And I know for a fact that, you know, that interrogation and I used, but they were here in Wisconsin, and they're all out of base. So all that is like, no, boy, still, they're going to try to use all this stuff against me. But I know that from that interrogation to the first one, all that was like a coercive type psychological intimidation of someone that, you know, had never been in that situation before, and they just used that to their advantage.
Well, Chris, what you witnessed firsthand is a game. It's like getting back to the old biblical days where you've got the big Roman soldier in the pen with, you know, the little guy, and you're fighting for your life, and you don't know what to expect. But that's a terrible analogy, I'm sorry, but I'm just saying, you just didn't know what was going on. And it's a game. That's what I tell so many people. This is a game that they're playing. You are the prey. They're the hunter. You're the prey. And they've got you exactly where they want you, and they're going to get you.
So he's gone for some kind of Miranda rights violation? Is that what he's trying to claim?
Yeah, something like what we just kind of mentioned, that he didn't get a psychiatric workup, he didn't have a lawyer. It's like, dude, you're the one who didn't ask for a lawyer. You took this polygraph. They literally said, if you had anything to do with this, I mean, you must have thought you were getting away with it. It's mind boggling. What was going on in his head? He certainly could not have thought he was going to get away with it. There was just no chance that was going to happen. And of course, I'd have to assume there's no chance he's getting out of prison, right?
Has he had appeals filed and motions ruled upon?
He hasn't filed those. And if you listen to the whole phone call, it's about 20 minutes. And he does talk about, like, he knows that he's coming up against a statute of limitations to file those. And what he's trying to do is get advice on how to fill those out. He does say words like, I don't want to tell them everything I know yet. I mean, so it sounds like it's kind of hinting that there might even be more, which really makes this conversation even more apropos of, like, well, what else could there be? Here's some other inconsistencies. This is just, there's a lot of odd things kind of still out there that haven't been investigated.
Because it's such a high profile case, are there some well-heeled lawyers offering to go pro bono for him?
You would assume so, but the thing that I've been seeing most, and I mean, obviously maybe your viewers know differently, is that he doesn't have the money to hire lawyers to do this. And that's kind of one of the elements that is keeping him in jail and keeping him on the, not being able to move forward with this as quickly. And that is why he's speaking with this person. He's kind of saying, I don't have these lawyer resources, so can you help guide me? And this person is, completely encouraging him.
So we saw Ted Bundy had a lot of people writing to him and supporting him, marriage proposals. Has anything like that happened with Watts?
Yeah, I'm sure he's had all of that. We can see in his discovery file, just they kept a lot of letters from women writing into him. One woman, Anna, that she's shown in the Netflix documentary, she wrote to him in September, right after the murders, and that her letter is in the public discovery file. And she continues to visit him. And she was shown, she's the one that was on camera in the Netflix documentary.
Yeah, there's actually a word for it. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it's considered a mental illness. People who are attracted to serial killers, and the attraction can prove fatal, it says on the wiki page.
It's strange. I mean, to be fair, I don't know what Anna's exact relationship with him is, but certainly there have been women that they've talked about a lot, and that he has hoped. He's actually said the words, I wonder if any of them might be Nikki contacting me under a different name, because he's still, while he's blaming her, he's still in love with her, possibly. I mean, at least, again, in this letters from Christopher, where he had this conversation with his pen pal, that's what he said.
So has Nikki gone on the record with anything recently? What's her life like these days? Do we know?
Well, interestingly, in October, she changed her name just this last October, which is like mind blowing, because I'm like, girl, how have you been living this whole time? So she just now changed her name, presumably because of this Netflix documentary. And interestingly, we see that it's been filed in Colorado. So she is still in that state. But one of the biggest misconceptions about her actually was that she's been on the witness protection program this whole time. And that's not true. She specifically asked the detective in one of her interviews if he could help her change her name. And he said, they did talk about witness protection. He said, witness protection, that's rare. And she's like, no, I don't need it. Just need help changing my name. And he told her to call a lawyer, which she apparently did 2 years later. So.
Chris, I know that prisoners aren't generally have access to internet. Was Chris able to watch the documentary, or does he give a reaction to it?
Well, interestingly, according to some unnamed source from people.com, that he was being really triggered by that documentary, that he was concerned about what people would see and think of him, what private communications he would have shown there, and he was nervous and scared about it. But then his mother did an interview with the Sun, I believe it was, and said that was not accurate, that he didn't know about it. He wasn't approached about it. He wasn't asked about it. And there's no chance he would see it. And they themselves were asked if they wanted to preview it before everybody else, but they were like, no, well, they watched it along with the rest of us and said it was pretty much exactly what they thought it would be.
Yeah, because there's a lot of contraband in prison, including phones. And I imagine if he were going to watch it, he would get access to a contraband phone and probably watch it by that method.
Honestly, that's what I was thinking. I mean, how do you not know about this very high profile documentary as a very high profile prisoner in general population? His father has said that he is now in general population, not locked down 23 hours a day. And he has a job, apparently, which is more than a lot of us could say. So, I mean, it's very, very interesting. If he hasn't seen it or if he hasn't known about it, I'd be surprised. But
so he's in a state prison. Is it Dodge Correctional Institute? Is that a state prison, not a federal prison?
That's a state prison in Wisconsin. That's maximum security prison.
So there's probably, that prison probably has a web page then where you can look up his prison record, I assume, because usually they're public and you can see what job he's got and things like that. I know you can do that for other states. I've never tried it with Wisconsin.
You know, because this is my life now. I did actually try to look him up with his prisoner number and his name, and there was no information came up, and I had to wonder, and you'd probably be the best person to ask, is that because he's a high profile prisoner and they don't want that information is intentionally blocked, or?
I'll give it a go myself after this and see what happens. But I imagine because the case has got so much media attention, they may have blocked any information getting out about him because they know it's just going to feed news stories and stuff. Yeah. What about Chris's parents then? We saw that, you know, as horrible as what Chris did, I really felt for his dad. We saw that moment in the program where he confessed to his dad, and you could just see the absolute heartbreak. Are his parents still alive, and do they still support Chris, or?
Yeah, absolutely. That's Ronnie and Cindy. They still live in North Carolina, and they are definitely still supportive of Chris. They acknowledge it seemed that in the news that there was a long period where they didn't acknowledge this third confession where he really gave more of the gruesome details of this crime. And they believed his first confession that Shanann flipped out, tried to murder the girls, and he murdered her, because they don't like Shanann. They've never liked her, and that's been well documented in the Netflix documentary and other reports that they didn't even go to the wedding. So that was something that Chris probably also seized on, knowing that they would believe it, that they would think that Shanann might be capable of doing something like that in a temper to punish him. So
some people come to prison then with very long sentences, and they're in a suicidal state. They're often put on suicide watch right away. Mm-hmm. And some of those people, they become very religious. And is that the case with Chris? What's happened there?
Oh, absolutely. Half of the reason why he wants to get out of prison is because he believes that God has a mission for him on the outside. He literally says the words in that phone call, "I'm supposed to be in prison, but not major. God has a mission for me for work on the outside." It's really, the level of delusion is like, it's really shocking, because I personally just came into this thinking like, well, certainly you'd have to have some sort of mental breakdown to do what he did to his family, but there's been no past history, health record of him having any kind of psychological issues growing up or anything like that. But then you hear this kind of phone call and you're just like, you must be absolutely, there is some mental unbalance happening here in some way. It's shocking.
And what's the story with the Fruit of the Loom boxes and petroleum jelly?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's talk about this. So again, just very recently, I believe this happened in July, but it just broke into mainstream news this last month, I believe, or even a couple of weeks ago, that he was disciplined. His first major infraction in prison was because they found his Fruit of the Loom boxers, petroleum jelly, baby oil, and some other personal items in another inmate's cell. This man and Chris are good friends, maybe in the biblical sense, that they are also writing a prayer book together. So they're writing books and having prayer circles and making friends. So they were punished. Their cells were moved apart, and he lost like phone and canteen privileges for a few weeks. And this, don't let me go down the rabbit hole, but let me tell you, this also ties back into before his mistress, Nicole, a man came forward and said that he had been having a relationship with Chris starting in June of 2017, going to March of 2018, off and on. And Chris, while he didn't identify as gay, he didn't identify as straight, the man had been encouraging him to come out to his wife. This man said that he met Bella and Celeste, which seems hard to believe. It's hard to believe, but he is in the discovery documents. The police did interview him and kind of dig into that a little bit deeper, and I don't know.
So we talked about various motives earlier: crime of passion, psychopathy. Was there a financial interest? Insurance?
The insurance, well, interestingly, yeah, the insurance is a big deal that hasn't really come out as much as it maybe should have. While he was working with Anadarko, he took out a $450,000 life insurance on Shanann and the girls. Now, with their deaths, that policy paid out, but Chris wasn't able to collect on it for obvious reasons. So in July of 2019, he filed a court order for that money to go to Shanann's family. But because in Colorado, there is a law saying that if the recipient, Chris, has no survivors, which he doesn't at this point, with his wife and children gone, it goes to his only living relatives automatically, which are his parents. So Shanann's estate, run by her father, filed a claim against that money. Shanann's parents filed a claim against that money, and his own parents had a claim. So at the end of it, the insurance company kind of washed their hands of it, gave it to the probate court, and let them sort it out. And from what I understand, they came to a settlement between them, but I haven't been able to get details on who got how much and when.
So there's numerous conspiracy theories. Could you give us the range of those? And there's the theory about the typos.
Oh yes, let's get into the typos. So I'm getting into my notes. So something that might have been investigated a little bit more, obviously if Chris hadn't confessed right away, are these supposed typos in the discovery files. Now, this is subject of a lot of debate, as you said. So the download of that phone search data shows a search for Chris's name on August 3rd, 2017, and Shanann's name on January 7th, 2018. Then there is another search for Shanann's name in September of 2017. So Nicole obviously didn't start working at Anadarko until the spring of 2018. She told police she didn't even really start talking to Chris until early June 2018, and they didn't start sleeping together until early July. So what's the deal with those typos? What's the deal with the searches an entire year before she would have theoretically known these people? So one theory, of course, is that this is a massive conspiracy. She knew them and or stalking them this entire time, and that obviously puts her involvement in a completely different light. The other theory, of course, is that they're just typos. But let me tell you, Crime Online contacted the Frederick Police Department, and the records supervisor said that this September 1st, 2017 date is just a typo. All right. Now, there are multiple typos in the discovery documents. I will give them that. Like, for example, this one says Monday, August 12th. It should say August 13th. So it's conceivable that it's a typo. But can I just tell you where I started? I started with the sense of like, come on, it's a typo, a conspiracy theory, it's a typo. But the more you kind of dig into it, the more of a believer you sort of become, because it's not just one typo, it's 3 typos. And what's the typo? Is it the year? Is it the month? Is it the date? Because that data dump was done before September. I mean, it was done when Nicole's phone was taken in August. It's really very confusing. And it would have been very, very nice if the Frederick Police Department had expanded on this a little bit more, considering what an impact it would make to the entire investigation. And here's what they said. I want to read you the quote, because Crime Online did contact the district attorney's office. And they said, Chris Watts' guilty plea precluded any need to further probe the results of the forensic analysis of Kessinger's phone. We did not get to the point in our investigation of attempting to independently verify that or not, because Chris Watts pled guilty. So where that anomaly in the data comes from, I can't answer it for you. I don't know the answer to that. So obviously, right, between that and all of these kind of inconsistencies between what Chris is saying she said and what we can use our common sense to know that she said or did based on what they found on her search results, it just seems this is why there's so much more conversation and so much more speculation about Nicole beyond just, well, she's a victim, he lied to her too. No.
How forthcoming to the police was Nicole? If Chris committed these murders and he was trying to keep everything hidden about his life, did she see the murders on headline news and run down to the cop shop and tell them everything?
Well, that's another kind of misconception. She was actually not the one to break the news to the police about her relationship with Chris. She, in actuality, the first one to tell the police was Chris's boss from Anadarko, because after the police started kind of questioning his coworkers who were also out at that oil site with him, they dug into his email and found email exchanges between Chris and Nicole that seemed very suspect. Like they seemed much more personal than obviously they should have been at work. And those were from early June, before they kind of took their relationship to a different, a different communication platform. So he turned those messages, those emails over to the police by 8 a.m. on August 15th. It says right there in the discovery. So it was only a few hours later that she came into the police. So you have to wonder, again, did somebody tell her that her emails had been turned over? She needs to turn herself in. Did they reach out to her and say and ask questions? Or was it just a coincidence that only a few hours later, she had her first phone conversation with the police? Now I want to tell you, this is another interesting audio clip, that when she did come into the station to be interviewed in person on August 16th, they asked her for her phone and she didn't want to give it up right away. Take a listen to this.
Just a thing on the courtesy for the phone for, what was that guy's name, Don?
This gentleman, for PD. I just met him today. Do you want to do the phone?
I forgot about that.
For TPD.
It's not for them. They're doing it for us.
Yes.
We don't have the equipment with us to do it, and I asked them to do it for us. They're not involved in this investigation. He would just be a computer person. He would not be looking at any of this stuff. That would fall to myself. So keep that in mind. He's not involved in this investigation. Thornton PD has nothing to do with this, other than letting us use their facility and helping us with some electronic download. He's not going to look at your phone right now. He's going to put it on a disk and they're going to give it to me.
Gotcha. I really want to help you guys. I do. I feel like this whole thing is just going to be crazy regardless of whether I give you my phone or not. I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. Like, it's happening. It's going to happen.
Well, the text reiterates what you've been saying all along, so it's not like...
Well, they do. That's the other thing, too. I mean, that's kind of a good backup. Yeah, I'll
I
give it
think
to them.
you hit the nail right on the head. There's reasons why we want everything. It validates things that we know. I'm not going to come out and tell you that. If you tell me something today, we'll validate it with your text messages, whether it's the ones we have now or the ones you're going to give us.
Certainly.
But obviously, as we know, she had deleted a lot of information before having that conversation, including looking up, can cops recover text messages? How long do phone companies keep text messages? Like numerous searches along those lines. So there's clearly like things she did not necessarily want them to know, and whether or not, you know, the level of innocence in that is certainly, I don't know, but there are many inconsistencies, and there was a lot to talk about concerning her phone. So there is a flurry of phone calls in these crucial days before and after the murders, from August 12th to the 14th. Now, we have a clip of the police asking her about these calls. So just take a listen to this.
So I'm gonna read off your phone calls for Monday and Tuesday, starting.
No, it's on Monday.
Okay,
It's
so
Monday night.
Monday night, you guys had, we talked about a phone call yesterday, but you guys had a phone call Monday night. It looks like he called you. It was 48 minutes and 57 seconds. It was at 9:48 p.m. that he called you. So that would take us to about 10:35. And then there's another call on Monday. It's for 51 minutes and 25 seconds. It looks like, I'm not sure looking at this who called who, but it looks like you called him. And that was at 11:09 p.m. That lasted 51 minutes. So that takes us to midnight. And then there's another phone call where he calls you. So we're now into midnight, you know, Tuesday morning. It's a 30-minute phone call that lasts until 12:38 a.m. And then after 12:38 a.m., there's a 2-minute and 44-second phone call that lasts for, or pardon me, that starts at 1:12 a.m. It's 2 minutes and 44 seconds. So there's a few more calls on Tuesday. So 1:12 is the 2-minute and 44-second call. So that lasts till approximately 1:14, and then there's a long gap until 1:50. So another 45 or 35 minutes, and then there's a 7-minute phone call. That phone call lasts till 1:58 a.m., and then there's a 10-second phone call at 2:07 a.m., followed by. I think he calls you and maybe leaves a voicemail or something, or you don't pick up. So there's a 10-second call, and then directly after that, there's a 10-minute and 24-second phone call.
Okay.
I mean, what are you talking about? Like that, at that level, right after the murders, it's this whole case just makes you just be like, what the? It's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. And she didn't remember what they were talking about. She has no idea. I mean, in this very crucial time, she's being questioned literally 2 days later. She doesn't remember what they were talking about, but she does remember FaceTiming on August 13th, and he was laying on a mattress without sheets and said he was washing the kids' sheets because they smelled. And she thought that was unusual because they're a very clean household. So it's just bizarre. But then, speaking of phones, there's that bizarre phone ping from Frederick the morning of the murders. Now, this is incredibly strange. So just like the typos, there are a couple of schools of thought on this, and I won't dive too far into it because it gets really detailed, but please, I would suggest everybody just search Nicole Kessinger phone bill and go down that rabbit hole if you're interested in this, because it gets wild. But here's sort of an overview. So some internet sleuths managed to break down the main areas where her phone pinged between her house and her work. So let's look at a map really quick. So she lived in North Glen, just outside of Thornton, circled there, and she worked in Platteville. It seems that she normally took Highway 85 to work, since her phone pings in Brighton and Fort Lupton often, and it only pinged in Frederick on the days she was known to be at Chris's house in July. So on that morning, it pinged in Frederick. So if she was just going to work, at the very least, why that morning do you change your commute route? Why that morning specifically? It's just.
Do you think with the flurry of the calls before the murders, that perhaps they were psyching each other up?
I mean, certainly since we don't know, since she can't remember, it really leaves it open to speculation. And I mean, certainly if I were Nicole and I had nothing to hide, I wouldn't have hidden anything. I wouldn't have hidden the text message, wouldn't have hidden this. But she says, you know, she was upset at Chris and she just wanted him out of her life. And like, who can't understand that for an ex, especially one that did something like this? But it's not the vibe you get from the interviews. It's not based on the rest of the evidence that you kind of see that there's just some major inconsistencies here that can't be explained, and that the police themselves say they did not investigate further because Chris confessed so quickly. Now, maybe it's nothing. I mean, that's certainly not for me to decide. That I will leave that to the authorities. But I mean, it's a question, and it's a question that nobody can seem to stop asking until we get some answers, which we may or may not ever get.
She was texting, can cops recover deleted text messages? How long do phone companies keep text messages?
And I mean, that alone, that alone has got to tell them what on earth was this girl hiding. And they were able to obviously recover a lot of that data, but there were some that they were not able to recover, and that they had to kind of get from Chris's phone, because even though she told him to delete text messages, all of her text messages, and she told her friends to delete all the text messages she'd ever sent them about Chris, that they were able to kind of piece some things together, but not based on what she gave them. So there's some questions there. Interestingly, there's still more strange behavior on August 14th. So as you pointed out, she was searching all of these, can they recover text messages? Everybody's, you know, deleting them for her. But on that same day, Chris told the CBI later in that February 2019 interview that on that day, Nikki was texting him what he said were weird questions that only he would know the answers to, so he could prove it was really him answering her. So she asked him, like, what's my dog's name? And he said he'd answered her, but she was still suspicious. And the police asked him, well, did they think we had your phone? Did they think she was talking to us? He said, I don't know. Maybe she thought, yes, maybe she thought she was talking to the police or Shanann on the other end. But in any case, that's like some next level behavior, personally. So again, unexplainable, in a very unexplainable series of events.
So she definitely had some things to hide, whether it was PR control or complicity and in being a co-conspirator. There's a range of possibilities. But did she cut a deal whereby she cooperated and is now immune from any type of prosecution?
Not that I've heard of in that kind of official way. It sounds like through her police interviews that they were really just talking to her as a witness, but also doing a little bit of digging, a little bit of probing to make sure she hadn't said some of the things. Like, they found a text exchange between her and a friend that said Nikki she was concerned about the fact that Chris had a wife and kids. She didn't want to be his seconds. She wanted a man that she could have firsts with. That's why she told him that she wanted to give him his first son. And he felt like that was something he could give her, even though he was already married. So things like that, she said to the police, oh, of course, I never said anything like that to him. Of course not. But again, human nature, we just have to use our common sense here. As a woman who's dating a man who's married, that you are in love with, that you have said, I love you, that you have Googled wedding dresses, marrying your mistress, terms like this, you're going to put the pressure on. Did she know he was going to murder his whole family? Probably not. No, that probably wouldn't be your first thing, but she had to have assumed he would leave her and not. But this is another interesting thing where she tells the police specifically that she tried to make Chris stay with Shanann. So listen to this quick clip about that.
So the second time I went to that house, I'm not sure what day it was, but it was the weekend of the 14th.
Of August. July.
I don't know if it was the 14th or the 15th. One of those 2 days. But we had went out and we stopped there just real quick on the way back. And we were there not very long. But that time I saw a picture of his wife and one of his kids. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, she's so beautiful. And I like took a step back and I was just like, this man has a gorgeous house. He has beautiful babies. He has a beautiful wife. He has an awesome job. Like, why would he want to leave this? And I remember talking to him about it. And that was the first time that I tried to actually say, what do you think about not separating from your wife? Like, what if you really try to work on this? And he had expressed to me that we've tried to work on this and it's not working. So that is why we're separating. And I spent some time, like, just, you know, kind of, because it almost made me feel bad, where I was, like, to the point where I'm engaging in a relationship with a man who, the way he described it, is in a contractual agreement, but was not in, like, an emotional relationship with somebody. And for me, the way I would have preferred to do this is to avoid it till that contractual agreement was also done, and he was done, and he could have approached me and said, I just had a divorce, you know, maybe we could take this slow, what do you think? But instead it was, oh, we're separated and we're working on a divorce. And that is the part that I feel bad about, because I should have waited on that and I didn't. And, you know, I was just like, well, they're already there. So, you know, but then being in that house, I was just like, why? Fix this. Find a way to fix this. Make it work, you know? And I was like trying to push him to do it, and he seemed pretty reluctant to do it. He didn't want to. And I don't know, we were still seeing each other fairly frequently, but I kind of like backed away so we weren't hanging out quite as much, and we were still close, but it was just, like, I really wanted him to try. Like, I wanted to know that he tried and it didn't work, and then he moved on. Not that, you know, they both kind of tried and then he got himself into a situation with somebody else. And I don't know. I just thought he had a beautiful life going on, and he could have made it work.
I mean,
I don't know if it's emotional immaturity or it's a psychopath that is trying to mimic normal human responses and behavior. And I'm leaning towards the latter, because in the search boxes, the records of what she had searched when to say I love you for the first time in a new relationship.
that was actually Chris who searched that.
Well, that was Chris. Okay, yeah. Sorry.
Which is a little bit weird. No,
yeah, that
like,
confirms his psychopathy then.
Oh, it does. These people should never have been together in any way, shape, or form. She was searching things though, like how to make your married boyfriend leave his wife. Like, not exactly that term. I can't find it in my notes, but when I find it, I'm going to break in and tell you, because it's exactly that level of insanity. And the idea that she had said these things about how, oh, I'm sorry, I'm breaking in. So it's man I'm having an affair with says he will leave his wife. I mean, okay. So the things that she said just in that little clip, like she was at his house, she was really wanting him to work on things with his wife, because that's what every mistress does. I mean, isn't that the plot of every rom-com, right? Like the mistress trying to get the guy to work on things with his wife. Come on. So clearly that wasn't happening. And Chris told the CBI later that in actuality, that day, specifically on July 14th, was one of the days when he had to talk her off a ledge. And those were the words he used, because yes, she was saying all those things. You have this beautiful wife, you have these beautiful children, but more with the spin of, why would you leave them? Please reassure me that you will leave them. And it with that type of spin. And he had to explain that, yes, you know, we're in the process or whatever. So not exactly the truth. Like in this whole story, the thing that kills me is that, I mean, I have to assume it's probably the same in any murder case, but the lies mixed with the truth, but at a level that you're just like, wow, it just layer upon layer of things. But really quick, do we have time for one more clip?
Yeah, go for it, please.
One more. okay, all right, this is crazy. So they've been together for 5 weeks, just to like recap a little here. They've had this intense relationship. They are saying I love you. Chris said he is spending every night with her. There's definitely not that like, oh, I'm giving this man space. That was not what Chris said was happening. So now all of a sudden he has to leave to go back to his real life in North Carolina and meet up with his family. But before he left on July 31st, he and Nikki had one last weekend together and they went away to the Great Sand Dunes. So you've seen some of those pictures there with them in the kerchiefs. That's them on their last vacation. So this is what Nikki told police though about Chris going to North Carolina.
I think it was like one of the last days of July. I'm almost positive. I think it was a weekday. Yeah, I flew out there and I thought I had like convinced him to like try to make peace with her. And I was like, if you guys work on this, like, I'm out. Because what's the point? Like, I'm not trying to be with somebody that's in another relationship, which I know that sounds silly given the whole relationship that we had in the first place, but I really was under the impression that they were separated. I mean, it was like reiterated to me so many times that that's what I thought it was. And it made sense to me too, because like he could pretty much call me whenever he wanted. Like I was the one that would tell him like, hey, when your kids are awake, you need to spend time with your kids. Like do that. And then after they go to bed, like if you want to talk to me, you can talk to me. But it was never like this super, super restricted thing. Like sometimes like right after work, if I was like still talking to him, I'd get kind of bummed out, and I tell him just like, oh, it's frustrating sometimes, like having to like wait. But at the same time, I was never like, this is horrible, or it was always like I understood why. But then once his kids were asleep, he never like had any. It was like he could do what he wanted. Do you know what I'm saying? Like he was in his basement and she's upstairs, and they're not speaking. So it kind of made sense. It wasn't like
You guys are just texting
or talking or whatever, I mean, and it was like I said, it was at certain times with that time, and originally it wasn't, but it was me that put that time frame on there because I thought he should hang out with his kids.
So again, just to like put perspective on that, what she's talking about is only a short time in June before Shaun left. They left on June 27th, I believe, for North Carolina. The rest of the time, of course, Chris was in fact alone. He was with Nikki. He could call her whenever he wanted. And then they got back on August 7th. And the very next day, he went to her house. And in this Letters from Christopher, he told this woman, Sherilyn Cato, that Nikki gave him a key to her apartment, her house on that day. And that was the day when he was like, okay, this is it. I'm getting rid of my family to be with this woman. So from that point on, things happened pretty fast. So that was August 8th. On that same day, he deleted his Facebook account, said because Nikki told him to. That same night, she Googled marrying your mistress. She was helping him look for apartments. Chris said to the CBI that only started on her end in August after he had told her, all right, that's it, I'm leaving. And on August 11th, for their last date, Chris got a babysitter. They went to dinner. He paid with his personal bank card for the first time. This is what the documentary covers this, where Shaun did see an alert for that amount on the bill, and then spent her time in Arizona waiting for a plane with her friends, kind of Googling, that restaurant's menu to find out what was happening. But meanwhile, he and Nikki were having this date. He went home to relieve the babysitter. And at 10 o'clock, they found records that she Googled Chris Watts, Shaun Watts, Ronnie Watts, and the address for the Watts house on Saratoga Trail. So that's what she did after their date on August 11th. Now, Nikki, in all of her interviews, she almost never says the names of Shaun, Bella, Celeste, or Nico. Like literally ever. She says things like his significant other. She says that couple, meaning Chris and Shaun. It's to the point of kind of a bizarre separation between reality and where she's at. But an hour and a half into a 2-hour police interview, she sort of remembers that it's not all about her and that these people died this horrific death. And I want you to listen to this very last clip because the biggest issue with her, I think, in addition to the inconsistencies here and the just endless questions, are that she just really doesn't come off as very sympathetic character. I mean, she really doesn't seem to care too much about what happened to his family. It's really all about her. And I think this clip really, really expresses a piece of that. Just take a listen real quick.
It's not fair. It wasn't fair to me in the first place. It wasn't fair to her in the first place. It wasn't fair to any of us in the first place. You know, it wasn't fair to his family for him to have an affair. It wasn't fair to me to have him lie to me and make me think that everything is going to plan. And still to this day, I don't even know what's a lie and what's not. I don't even know if they were like filing for divorce. I don't know if they were putting the house up. I don't even know anymore what is real and what is not. But what I do know is it's just like, you know, that wasn't fair to me either, because if I'd have known not even all the truth, but like obviously some of it, I wouldn't have even engaged in any of this in the first place. And it just, I mean, and that's the part for me, just like on my personal level, outside of everything that is happening, that is gonna affect me long term. It's like, you know, I'm gonna wake up every day and know that like this mom and her unborn child and these two little girls are not around anymore, and it breaks my heart. It is, oh my God. And then I have to think about like the consequences of his actions and how they affect everybody else. Like all of these, her family's impacted. My name is about to be like slandered for probably a while. I don't know how long it's going to take to heal, but I would not be surprised if it's going to be hard to go out in public sometimes for a couple of years. And that really hurts me. I'm just like, this is a horrible, horrible thing. Like, how dare you, you know? And if people aren't going to understand that, you know, they're going to say, oh, you know, you're the woman that had an affair with this man who took out his whole family. And I take a step back and it's just like, I didn't know. Like, he's so disgusting. I'm so ashamed of him and everything. And I just, all those little girls, they're so little.
But if I had let it run, you would hear her go back to her normal speaking voice right away. So that little clip is the only time out of 5 police interviews right after this happened where she really even mentions them, and certainly not by name, and shows any emotion. So these are the things that are, I think, maintaining this level of interest in her, because it's not, and we've seen from different crime cases that the mistress does have some involvement, obviously, in the murder. I'm not saying she does in this case at all. She may not, of course, you know, probably not. She probably was just trying to, you know, protect her own reputation, protect herself. That's probably the case. But there are so many unanswered questions and so many bizarre coincidences that you have to wonder, is that the case? I mean, it just makes a person wonder. And there probably should have been a little bit more investigation into that, but there wasn't.
Regarding Chris using the bank card then, do you think he did that on purpose, subconsciously or otherwise, to provoke his wife so he could reach that peak of getting the murders done?
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe he does say that at that point he was just like, I'm done. I don't care anymore what she thinks or what she knows. And if we believe that he was premeditating this, even as soon as like the day before, August 10th, and prior, obviously, that asking his boss, volunteering to his boss that he was going to go out to those oil sites on Monday morning, then he would have known that was going to be the last, that it wouldn't matter. And I believe the documentary does address that. He kind of comes around at the very end, and Shanann is more hopeful at the end that he is going to work on their marriage, that he is going to make everything okay. And I believe even the documentary kind of hints at or implies that meant it didn't matter anymore. He was going to murder her anyway. At that point, he maybe making it less, making her trust him more would be easier to make that happen. But Either way, it's just it makes it more he's right. With his first confession, it was less horrifying to think that somebody had just snapped. But considering the facts, all of the facts that we now know based on all of the information that's been acquired over these years, we now know that it's hard to believe that it wasn't premeditated, that he wasn't thinking about it this whole time. And then, you know, that's why it keeps coming back to the woman he was with that whole time. So
some questions are coming in from the viewers right now. We've got about 1,600 people watching it live presently. You've got one here from Lou in the UK. What does Amy think? Oops, it just scrolled away from me. What does Amy think about the mistress wanting to talk with him ASAP? She has something to tell him.
Help me understand what message would that be? The talking to him ASAP.
Lou, could you expand on that question, please, and let us know?
Is that in the email?
We'll have to wait and see what Lou follows up that one with. Let's have a look. The stream's going quite fast right now. Let me just slow it down. And for people watching this, in the description box below the video is the link to Amy's channel that she's running with her husband. They've got over 100,000 subs on that, true crime. So I know a lot of you guys would enjoy going down there and supporting Amy and her husband's work. I would appreciate you doing that, especially as you spent so much time with us today. It was only supposed to be an hour and we're at an hour and a half.
I'm so sorry. I told you ahead of time. I'm like, there's so much. So.
Sandra Antonio, why does Chris protect Nikki so much? Why has no one come forward to speak about her, like her friends and family? Is she alone in the world?
That probably not. They probably are protecting her in the way that they won't come. But I'm like, girl, let's talk about it, because I myself have been wondering for so long, like, why? Because this is my life. I literally randomly, like 3 months ago, before this even came out, was like, whatever happened to Nikki Kessinger? That's weird, because you haven't heard anything from her. And again, in this world of social media, I would have thought that if she's sitting in a cubicle next to somebody, the person next to her would have been like, my office mate is Nikki Kessinger. It's hard to believe, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to go down a small rabbit hole. So she used to work on an oil rig, and her big accomplishment was getting this job with Anadarko, where she met Chris, and this thing ensued. So she may have gone back to work on an oil rig after that, which is pretty much, cut off from everything else. There may be why we haven't heard from her, and maybe she's changing her name because she's come back into the States. I don't know. That's purely speculation based on her past history, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard to believe that she hasn't been outed, so to speak, but her friends, I would say she probably has more friends that are protecting her than not. And she's just not around other people, or they're not as into this as we are. How's that possible? But
Being asked who owns the clothes at the bottom of the stairs.
I'm sorry?
Who owns the clothes at the bottom of the stairs? Would that have been in one of the videos that the police?
Oh, yes, that was Shanann. That was the bloody sheet that Shanann that was found near her and Nico's grave. And then the clothes, if we're talking about from the police, that video where the police were kind of shaking it out, those were Shanann's, the t-shirt, her bra, and underwear that were found with her.
Okay, thank you for that question, Samantha. Tara has said that Nicole was putting crystals under CC's pillow. And could you expand on her and the crystals and the occult?
Okay, I do have a quick story about the crystal thing. Now, also on July 14th, it showed that Chris did a 2-hour search researching one specific crystal called dioptase. I believe I'm pronouncing that right, dioptase. So I looked up its symbolism, knowing that Nikki was into crystals. So this is from the Crystal Council. And they say, dioptase is a vibrant talisman of the heart that can help one relinquish extremely sensitive emotions such as grief, trauma, depression, anxiety, and self-hate. This special mineral exposes one's heart and brings about soothing waves of life force energy that help reset one's emotional body. Each day, this stone will pull out more strength from one's body that may have gone dormant. This strength will eventually become so overwhelming that it will naturally raise one's self-confidence and courage levels, forcing you to take action and make change.
Wow.
So clearly Chris is not coming up with this stuff on his own. Nikki is into crystals. He knows that. There was a photo in Discovery of him holding up a crystal that it was stored in one of his secret calculator app thing. So that was for Nikki. So yeah, it's again, it's just like, I'm sure it's just, there's so many questions. It's almost like you don't know what to say. You're like, how could that be possible? It can't be possible, but there's so many questions.
So Adele Louise Hargreaves asked, hello from the UK. Can you ask when Chris said he wished he had gone to the Rockies game and what did he mean by that?
Oh, okay, yes. So that is a quote I believe he gave Sherilyn Cadle in Letters from Christopher, and possibly the CBI in that second interview, but that he had said to Sherilyn specifically that he thought that God was giving him several opportunities to back out of this decision, to change his mind, to change this trajectory. And one of those times that he felt that trajectory was a God-given gift was that he did have Rockies tickets. His coworker had invited him. He told him that he was busy that night. He was going out on this date with Nikki, but he is now going back and saying, if I had only gone, maybe I wouldn't have, used that personal card. Maybe I would have had, he says kind of over and over, mainly in these letters from Christopher, because it's a little bit more informal, that he wishes if he had just had a little space from her, if he had just been able to think, if those 5 weeks in North Carolina hadn't happened and he didn't have so much freedom to be with her, maybe all these things wouldn't have happened. But obviously I really want to make, it is his fault. I mean, we all know that, right? Like Chris committed these murders. It's not Shanann for leaving. She should have been able to do that. And he shouldn't have gotten congratulations on not murdering me when I come back award. But it's just that there were so many opportunities like that for him to change. The girls not being dead when he thought that they were dead was another opportunity, he said in that same passage, that was God's way of saying, hey, you might not have to murder your whole family here, but he went ahead and kept going.
Question from Tom Hunter, was Chris a beta male easily manipulated by Nikki and his mom?
It's hard to understand. It's interesting because he seems to gravitate towards the same personality type everywhere in his life. So his own mother and father, they describe in the documentary that they had the same type of dynamic in their relationship. His mother was more dominant. His father was more easygoing, the way that Chris wanted to appear to be. His own parents, his mother is a little bit more dominant, his father easygoing. Shanann was more dominant, Chris. And then here's Nikki. She's certainly strong. You can hear her just in these clips in the interviews being very she's very well-spoken. She's very strong-minded. She knows exactly, what Chris should have done. She was helping him create this new life, find a new place to live, erase his Facebook, get on a meal plan, fix his she was really in control of him too. So I don't know, Chris.
Amanda wants to know if Nikki has a new man.
I want to know that too. I'm so curious. But no, I don't. I haven't heard anything like that. Although there was a guy that kept coming up in the Discovery stuff, and he was staying with her. And I have to wonder if Chris knew about that guy, if she herself describes him as just a friend, but I don't know, I have to wonder.
Has she deleted her internet presence?
She scrubbed her internet presence before she met Chris because she had said to him she was in an abusive relationship right before him. What she called abusive, so we don't know exactly what that meant. Emotionally, physically, we don't know. But she called it abusive to the point where she did scrub her entire presence. She wasn't on anything. And her mail was being sent to her father's house, I believe is what Chris said, that she was already kind of off the grid, so to speak. But she still knew how to Google stuff and look things up on Facebook. You don't have to have an account to do that, so.
Tara Ann's asked, how did Nikki's dad know the investigating officer by first name?
I'm sure it was as simple as just being introduced to him. I think I've heard different rumors that, oh, her dad was a cop, her dad is a lawyer, but no, he's not. He's a geologist, I believe, in a similar field as Nikki. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I think you might also be referring to when he says, do you hear me, Nick, or stop, Nick? I think he's referring to Nikki, his daughter. He's just calling her Nick. That's her nickname.
Joe the Cat asked, does Amy believe that Nikki might have tried to write to Chris in prison, or is that unlikely?
I have wondered about that so much too. I mean, I don't know. You'd have to wonder. And I guess that goes back to the truth of their real relationship, wherever that lies, somewhere between what he said, what she said, what hasn't been said. But I don't know. I know that Chris has said multiple times to different sources that he has wondered if every piece of communication he gets from a woman might be her writing to him under a different name.
Graciela said, I heard Chris has a new girlfriend. How can he have a girlfriend if he's locked up? So that would be a pen pal relationship, I imagine.
Yeah. There's entire reality shows about that, pen pal relationships in prison. And it seems like he got real popular really fast. I included the link, I think you have it, Shaun, in the description below to the full discovery file. And let me tell you, it is some crazy reading. But when you get in there, I'm like, I know this thing by heart. It's like near the thousands. It's like a 2,000 page document, but I want to say like around page 1,500, you're going to get into some of the letters photocopied that women wrote to him. And it's shocking what and this was right after he committed these murders. So yeah, he probably has several girlfriends.
So there's links in the description box for Amy's YouTube, Facebook, and then she's got numerous resources down there, her sources for the interview today. So if you want to get lost in hours and hours of research on this case, you can go down there and click on all that other stuff as well. And like I said, Amy's been very generous with her time this evening. She agreed to do an hour, and we're almost at 2 hours. So please go down and subscribe to her channel and support the work that her and her husband are doing. Is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion then to the people watching this?
I mean, it's like, what hasn't this girl said, right? But I promise you, if you come over to our channel, we keep it tight. It's less than 30 minutes. You won't get this level of like, dear God. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed talking about this with you today. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it was a great pleasure. Absolute excellent presentation. Loved how you put all the photos and the clips in there. Really, really top notch, and would be great to do something again in the future.
Love that.
Thank you very much for coming on.